Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host, Jonny Lipsham.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Songwriting Simplified over here at Jonny Lipsham Studios.co.uk in Edinburgh, Scotland, capital of the world, etc., etc. I'm on my own again. The reason being is Jonny is feeling quite considerably under the weather. I spoke to him about an hour ago, and he was complaining of having a quite a severe headache. So didn't feel that he could do the show, but I'm sure he'll be just fine and right as rain for tomorrow night's show over on his channel, and then yeah, I'm sure he'll be fine. So anyway, so we're over with me, and I haven't had time to kind of really plan too terribly much, so it is entirely 100% open to you guys and your questions on songwriting, arranging, composing, and music theory, and all of those kind of related subjects. And I would be very happy to take your questions for at least the next 45 minutes, if not an hour. I am feeling much better than I was on Sunday. Somehow I managed to get through that whole show on Sunday, pretty much. But yeah, I was not feeling very well at all. I had what has turned out to be food poisoning, which I gave to myself. Yay! I'm a real talent in the kitchen. Everybody else was fine. It was me, because I decided I did not want what everybody else was having for dinner. I decided I wanted to sort something out for myself, so I did, and promptly gave myself food poisoning because I'm a genius. So my tummy has not recovered too terribly well, but I'm getting there. So, yes. Yes, thank you very much, Mika. That was not my voice on the voiceover, by the way. Everyone that's been listening to that intro that I put out at the start of every show, no, that is not my voice. I am not English at all, and that voice clearly is, and I think that voice might even be a little bit lower pitched than mine as well. But anyway, I actually used a voice synthesizer for that. There are a few out there where you can just type in the text that you want it to read, and it will read it the way you want it to. It's very, very cool, and it's a quick and easy way to get, a voiceover done. So that's what I used. Works really well. And you just render it down to MP3, and then all I did was I mixed it with a bit of EQ, bit of limiting, bit of compression, and some reverb, and it sounds pretty good. And it does sound a little bit like an artificial voice. So yeah, but it's cheap and cheerful. And I really did not want to introduce myself to my own shows. I thought that's maybe not too terribly classy. But I know some people that do that. So, I don't know. Maybe I need to invest in somebody like The Voice, my good friend Steve, and see if he will do me a voiceover to announce my shows. That could be quite cool. Anyways, let's see who we have here. In tonight's gathering of the Mind Hive, we have Billy Morgan. He was first in the door, and then we have Bob Studios, Alps Media, the sponsors of Home Studio Trainer. So I guess kind of partly sponsoring this particular show, because this is normally a Home Studio Trainer kind of show. Music to Motion is here as well, and you guys are all talking together. We have John Hawk is here as well, and Mika Han, and bringing up the rear. Who do we have coming in after that? Starlight, that over in I think you're in Australia, aren't you, Starlight? He says, I heard that you and your wife have been married for 14 years. That is correct. And Steve, yes, Steve could probably do a voiceover for me. I'm sure he would have no bother doing that. I'd have to get him to work on his Scottish accent, though. I'm sure he could do that. I'm sure he could do that. He's a man of very many talents, so I'm pretty sure he could do one. And Thomas over in the Philippines is also here. That's who I missed out. And David Anthony over in Australia is here as well. And Mr. Mills. I think you might be new to my show, Mr. Mills. And if you are, welcome. Welcome to the chat as well. The folks in the chat are amongst the friendliest and most helpful people on the planet. So they will, I'm sure, help you as well as me doing my bit as well. And Ronald Figuera is here. He says, me. Yep. Mika says, you need a sexy voice whispering longingly as an intro, welcoming us into the mysterious world of music theory. Yes, probably something like that. So we got about 20 people here, which is pretty cool. Mr. Mill says, thanks. You are very welcome. Please do feel free to ask any questions regarding songwriting, arranging, composing, music theory, all of that fun stuff. Get that into the chat if you have any questions on that, and I will do my very best to answer those. We've got the Fender Rhodes electric piano at the ready, and I've got some drums up here as well. Or at least I did think I had. Anyway, maybe I don't. Maybe I have them muted. Yes, I do have them muted. Okay, not to worry. Not to worry. Yeah, I had them muted. But that's not a problem. But yes, I have Studio One open and ready to go if you guys need showing anything in Studio One to do with songwriting, arranging and composing and that kind of fun stuff. Happy to do any of that. But yeah, so we're going to be running tonight for at least 45 minutes, if not an hour. It'd be nice if we could get to the full hour with a raft of really good questions. Because you guys ask the best questions and you're always trying to challenge me and trip me up, which is cool. I like that. Let's see. Do we have a question? Yeah, we do. Music to Motion with the first question. And Rick Grant is here. Hello, Rick. Good to see you. Welcome. Music to Motion asks, can you explain what is meant when a brief for, say, a tension track asks specifically for an A-B format? Well, A-B can mean anything. It can mean comparative. Like you would A-B a plugin after you've done processing on it. Or it could mean quite simply that it needs to be in A-B form, which is an A section followed by a contrasting B section. That could be the most likely thing that it's talking about. But yeah, I don't know the specifics there. But yes, A-B might mean, I mean, it's hard to say without context, but it might be, please play me one D major chord. Peter Brooks, this is for you. But yeah, I'm not entirely 100% sure without any context as to what you mean by A-B format. But yes, it could well be that you need to have a piece in two contrasting sections, an A section and a B section. Let's see. Ronald says, can you recommend software for creating lead sheets? Yes, I can. Notion. You can totally create lead sheets in Notion. I have been using Notion now since 2016. I used to use Sibelius. I used Sibelius for a very long time. Until Avid bought them, actually. And then I stopped using them and I went to a free piece of software called MuseScore. MuseScore is okay. It doesn't have the best sound library in the world, but it's all right. It's okay. It gets the job done. And it's a little bit clunky to use. Some of the menus are less than intuitive, shall we say. And there are definitely some graphical issues going on with the way things are laid out. And some of it just does not make any sense whatsoever. But to get a job done real quick in a bind, you can get a chart written pretty quickly, but it's clunky as heck, and I wouldn't recommend it if you are planning to write lead sheets and arrange charts for an ensemble for any great length period of time. So if it's something that you're going to be involved in quite a lot over a protracted period of time, let's say you are tasked with writing arrangements for an orchestra or a big band, and that is kind of your job, and you are going to be doing that for a particular large project, and it's going to be an ongoing thing, I would definitely not use MuseScore. The other option is Finale, but Finale is pretty much gone, unfortunately, because of changes in operating systems that have taken place in recent years. They have just not been able to keep up. So they have pretty much fallen by the wayside, sadly, because their product is actually really good. And other than Notion, it's really the one that I would otherwise have recommended. So that said, long story short, my answer really is Notion. If you've not seen Notion before, I can show you Notion. I just need to start it up. And I can show you, can I show demo scores? Let's go score, demo files. Let's go and open this one. Okay, yeah, I can show you Notion. If you're interested, I can show you Notion. I'll do this real quick. Don't want to take up everybody's time. But this is what a full orchestral score looks like, including harps and strings, and there's several harps actually here, and percussion, lots of percussion there. Notice how the percussion is written, untuned percussion is written on single lines rather than actual full 5-note staves, 5-line 4-space staves. So that's why that is. But that's what a full orchestral score looks like. It's a little bit hard to see because it's deliberately kind of narrow. And then there's a cue part at the top there in blue. But I can zoom into this if I just do Control plus. Hang on, do I need to select the score? Control, can I zoom in? Yeah, here we go. So I'm zoomed in here on this score. I go across this way. There's an end tempo score. With part at the top here, which basically just it's just the rhythmic notation of the melody. So even when the melody switches from the flutes here to the English horn, this part stays the same, because this is like your rhythm part, and this is helpful for conductors learning to conduct. But yeah, to show the marks. So you got a tempo marking here, and then you got your title, and then you got your phrase markings here, and you got dynamics. And the cool thing about this, there you go. You can see the snare drum here, bass drum, suspended cymbal. There's some crash cymbals, bunch of all sorts of percussion going on there. Marimba. Celeste. Celeste's very, very lovely. And a piano and a harp. Notice how the pedal tunings for the harp are written in text here. And then you've got glissando signs, and then there's your strings at the bottom. So that's how a full orchestra would be laid out, and I can play this. Tempo change. as well as time signature change. Okay, there you go. So that's kind of how Notion works. Notion is fun. But this is, you're asking about lead sheets, and I'm showing you a full score, which is probably not entirely what you're after. But lead sheets are very, very easy to put together as well. And there's a very helpful quick reference and a user guide as well. And if you are a member of Personosphere, you get Notion 6 plus the expansion packs as well. So that includes all the jazz woodwinds and jazz brass and all of that fun stuff that are normally add-ons that cost quite a bit of money. So, but you get those automatically. So I hope that helps answer that question. And I'm going to switch back over here. And I'm going to... Do I need to minimize Notion? Yeah, let's just minimize Notion for now. All right, we've got 25 people in here, and we have a donation from Robar's Melted Cheese Home Studio. I love the name of your studio, Melted Cheese Home Studio. That is awesome. It's making me hungry thinking about it, but that is an awesome name. And that is a €5 donation. Thank you very much for that. It is greatly appreciated. And no sooner have I finished my sentence than Ronald Figuera has donated $20. Thank you very much. You guys are super generous and super kind at the moment, and it is greatly appreciated. When we get to the end of the show tonight, I am going to share some information with you guys that is not public knowledge as yet. I kind of hinted at it maybe on Sunday, but yeah, I will give you a little bit more detail on that at the end of the show. So let's see. Greetings to all you Prosonians, says Robarth. Greetings to you, my friend, and thank you for your very kind generosity. Appreciate it. Bellap Studio is here. Can you take a score from Notion and play it with something like East, West, or Spitfire? Yes, you can. Both will work. They most definitely will both work. And the orchestral rules, for the most part, will work too. Mr. Mill says, I have the Atom pad, I guess you mean the original one. I'm now interested in the Atom SQ. How would I be able to utilize both the Atom and the SQ, or would I just be throwing money away? No, you can use both, because they are, for as much as they are both atoms, in that they are in the same family, they are actually quite different devices, and they have some different functionality. And you can certainly use both of them at the same time, for sure. Gregor has done videos on it. Go and check out my colleague Gregor's videos on the Personas YouTube channel. He's got some great videos on Atom. He is pretty much an atomic genius. Thank you, Roboth. I appreciate that. That's very kind. Let's see, who else have we got here? Lily May says, I wrote my second original and I want this one to have more of a flowing feel to it. In grammar, we learn to use connecting words, and I need to learn how to do that with music. Connecting words. Interesting. In music, we have themes, and you connect the themes together. And you can do that with fairly simple tools like question and answer, call and response, echoing. You can do it with. So, if you have like a flute play a little figure like, you can echo it by having a cor anglais or an oboe play this. Or you can have that little figure tossed around the orchestra, and then you can develop it. I mean, think back to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, the first movement, where you get da 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 da. I think we looked a little bit about this on Sunday. That little figure is one little figure, da 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 da, and then it gets shifted down, da 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 da, and then it gets tossed around the orchestra and transposed to fit the chords. And then the theme comes to a climax, and then the whole thing gets shifted to the dominant key, because I think it's in the key of G. So then it goes to the key of D, and the theme is restated again, and then it gets tossed around the orchestra again. So you kind of get this A section transposed into the dominant, and then you get a developmental section called which we would kind of maybe call a B section, because the first movement of that symphony is in sonata form, which is essentially what we would now call a more modern AABA form. So sonata form, where you have like exposition, development, recapitulation. So that's like ABA. But oftentimes the A section, the exposition, the first half is in one key, is in the tonic, and then the second half is the theme restated but in the dominant. So how do we connect all of these things together? Because that's like broad brush structural things. That's like the foundations of building your house, is the form that you're going to write your work in, and how you're going to break things, the big picture, the broad framework for your piece. Well, then you have to kind of narrow it down, break it down into smaller chunks. And you do that by using themes, little short motifs, little short melodic ideas that you can develop by either extending it, by contracting it, by inverting it so it's upside down, or having it backwards, which we would call retrograde, and all sorts of other developmental tools that you can apply to just this one short little fragment of melody, which we would call a motif or a theme. And then what you would do with that is you would join them together, and you would create counter melodies that respond to the statement. So if this little statement, if that little statement is the musical equivalent of hello, then, the other person says hello. And then this person then goes, oh, great, somebody's talking to me. I can go, how are you? I am fine, or I am fine. Except it would be more major because you're happy. I am fine. Oh, you're fine. Yes, I'm fine. And so on and so forth. And that's how you develop melody, is you create a short little sentence and then a response to that from a different instrument, a contrasting instrument. And that's how you join things together. And before you know it, you have dialogue between two instruments, and then you can develop that into adding other characters, other instruments into your scene that have a different melody, maybe something else. Maybe you've got like a flute and a cor anglais that are kind of starting things off. They're having their little discussion. They've just met each other for the first time. Well, then after that, you can have like a French horn come in and say, oh, hello, you two, can I join in this conversation? No, we don't like brass. We'd rather, we're woodwinds. We'd rather just hang out with ourselves. And then in walks saxophone. No, you're jazz. We don't want you here. And you can develop your musical ideas like that. And then you have your broader framework within which you are working. So you're kind of making your statements, your little motifs, and then you are organizing them into more, kind of more organized little blocks, which I would call like mini A, mini B. And so in your A section, you might have a mini A, which you repeat. So you get two mini A's and then a B and then another mini A. And that comprises your A section. Then your B section, and we're still on the first movement of your work. The B section would be taking all of those ideas from the A, the mini B, and developing those. Maybe you take them through several different keys. Maybe the whole overarching key of your piece is G major, and so you go to the relative minor. So you're in E minor, but then you kind of go and check out A minor as well. And then maybe you go back to E minor, and then maybe you go to the dominant. So you go to D, and then that leads to maybe a pedal point on a D with chords kind of changing over the top. And that takes you back to the tonic, where you can restate everything that you had in the start in your first section, your A section. So you've gone A, B, and then you're coming back to A, your recapitulation. You're recapping the whole thing, and you're wrapping up all of the ideas you've developed, and making your final arguments, arguing your final case that that first theme is the best piece of musical motif writing ever made. And that is how you kind of develop the whole thing. So, Lily Mae, that is a massively long answer, but I hope that it helps you, and help you break things down. Because, you know, when you're looking at the big picture of composing a piece of music, it can be daunting, and you can go, I don't know where to start. You know, a whole symphony. How the heck do I do that? Well, Beethoven wrote an entire 4-movement symphony based out of da 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 da, and that was it. That was the starting point. And, you know, it developed, and it had, you know, different ideas. And then by the end of the 4th movement, those kind of da-da-da-da ideas are starting to come back again. And, oh, hang on a minute, I remember that from the 1st movement 30 minutes ago. Yes, I know that. I can sing that. And that was Beethoven's intention. So break it down into small bite-sized pieces. A motif, a contrasting motif, another contrasting motif, and then kind of work with those. And that's 4 little motifs that you can spend the next 10, 15, 20 minutes of your work kind of expanding, pulling it apart, turning it upside down, stretching it, contracting it. Play with it. And that's how you make music. So have fun with that is all I would say. And the donations have been coming in, and I've been missing them. So sorry about that, folks. Music to Motion says, I'm following the trend. Jonny gives a vast amount of information to us. And he's donating $20. Music to Motion, thank you so very much. You guys are so generous tonight. I really appreciate it a great deal. You have blessed me. You have really, truly blessed me. So yes, that was a long answer to a short question. Peter Brick says, why can't I use the samples from Notion 6 in Studio One 5? Great question. Simple answer. Notion predates Studio One by a considerable margin. Notion is probably about 15 years old. Maybe a little bit older. Maybe 16 or 17 years old. Studio One is only 11 years old. 12 years old. So Notion and Studio One kind of are 2 completely different beasts. Studio One was developed entirely by PreSonus. First of all, we contracted out to a development team called Crystal, and then we acquired Crystal, and Crystal became what we now know as PreSonus Software. And in 2013, I think it was, PreSonus also acquired Notion Music and all of its assets, including Notion and Progression, and I think those are the only 2 softwares. I can't quite remember. But those 2 software came with Notion, and they became part of the PreSonus software catalog. So they are 2 different beasts, and they have 2 different sample libraries. The sample library for Notion was recorded by the London Symphony Orchestra at Abbey Road Studios in London. I have been there. I have recorded at that studio. And it's the famous Abbey Road Studios where the Beatles recorded a lot of their records, and a lot of film scores get recorded there, which is why I was there. I was not there at the time that the London Symphony Orchestra were in doing the sessions for Notion. But yeah, So that's why Notion sounds do not work in Studio One, because they are completely different sound libraries. So you can't use Notion sounds in Studio One for that reason. They are completely separate. So I hope that answers that question, but it is a really good question, Peter. Let's see. John Lake says, I have a song that has been on 3 albums in Europe. It is under ASCAP. What is ASCAP supposed to do for me? ASCAP are supposed to collect your royalties for sales of that record or those 3 records. So if your songs are on those 3 records, ASCAP should be collecting your royalties and they should be sending you royalty checks. However, that might not be the case if you personally are not with ASCAP. The record might well be published, and associated with a publisher that is registered with ASCAP. But if you personally, as the composer or the songwriter, are not registered with ASCAP, they might not do anything for you. So you probably want to look into that, is what I would say. John Hawk says, I haven't got around to Notion as yet. Yeah, Notion is a beast all of its own. And if you know nothing about notation or music, or you have no grounding in music theory whatsoever, it will be a considerably large learning curve to get over. It's not impossible, but there is definitely a larger learning curve because you have to learn how notation works. You have to learn the rules of what can and cannot be done in writing notation based upon the rule sets that Notion is built upon. So, which is actually a fairly standard set of rules, to be honest. I forget what it is called, but there is a standard set of notation rules as to what you can and cannot do with notation. And that's the rule set upon which Notion is based. So there are some things that you definitely cannot do and some things that you can't do yet because those things have not been developed yet. But there are some things where it's just a case of no, that just will not ever happen because of the rules of notation as they currently stand. If the rules of notation change, then we will probably change with those rules. But currently, there are a whole set of rules. So you will have to kind of familiarize yourself with those, familiarize yourself with pitch, rhythmic notation, transposing. So like if you're writing for instruments like cor anglais, or you're writing for French horns or trumpets or trombones or French horns or tubas or Wagner tuba or alto horn, tenor horn, all of those kind of instruments, they are all transposing instruments. And that in and of itself is something that requires a little bit of deep understanding of how things work. Essentially, cut a very long story short with transposing. Transposing is essentially a way of compensating in notation for the pitch that an instrument is in. For example, an alto saxophone is in the key of E flat. Well, not the key of E flat, but its key center is E flat. So that means a C played on the piano. So this middle C here played on the piano. The alto sax will place the sax player will place his or her fingers on the keys, and what they will be fingering is an E flat, the E flat below. So you write, in order for your sax player to play this C here, you need to write up a major 6. So you don't write the C, but you write an A. And when you write this note on the alto sax player goes, okay, I see an A, I finger an A, and what comes out is a C. Okay? A little bit easier with trumpet. Trumpet is pitched down a tone from concert pitch. So if I play a C here and I say, Mr. Trumpet Man, I want you to play this C here. He will play a D. Okay, he will have to finger a D on his instrument in order to make this C. So the compensation, therefore, is you write a tone up from concert pitch to correct for the transposition required. So it goes up a tone. And there are many another, like French horns, for example. I talked about French horns. You have to write up a fifth for French horns, and so on and so forth. So there's lots of different instruments that are pitched in different keys, or different key centers, and the way you compensate for those is you either write above or you write lower than. It depends on the instrument, but most of the time you are compensating by writing above the pitch that you want. So those are kind of the things that you need to learn if you want to use notation. Alrighty, let's see. You guys are talking about ASCAP, which is helpful. Thank you all. Lily May says, I feel like I have a chord progression that I like, but it just not flow as much as I would like. Yeah, that's kind of hard because the word flow could mean anything to anybody. So, those are kind of what I call broad, vague terms. What flows for one person is not going to flow for another. So, for example, if I am playing, if I want to go C, A minor, D minor, G7, that flows quite naturally. And everyone thinks that's nice, right? But what if I want to do this? That second example might not flow particularly for you, but for me it does. It falls under my fingers quite nicely. The voices lead quite naturally. Kind of depends what you mean by flow. Do you mean you are trying to get the chords to fit nicely together, the voices lead naturally together? Try different inversions. So if I'm going C major 7 to A minor 7, I could do it really naturally just by moving one finger on in my right hand here. And then for F major 7, I just need to move my top finger. For G7. See how all of that does actually flow quite naturally, and that's all because of the way the voices or the chord tones within the chord all move. It's all natural, next door neighbor notes, I call it. So I hope that helps. Let's see. The chat just jumped like it does. Yeah. Let's see. Spaceship talking scene in Close Encounters. Yeah, that's one of my favorite things ever. If you want to get into the concept of call and response and making a dialogue musically, that is how you do it. John Williams taking one little theme, da 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 da, and then having different voices effectively toss this around, and then he develops it, and by the end of it you have like a 9-part fugue going on, and it's epic, and it's all done by this one little theme. And that's, of course, the music of Bach, really. Take a little theme, pass it down, from soprano to alto to tenor to bass, and then back up again, and interweave the different parts together, and you get kind of fugue at that point. And that definitely works. Let's see. Starlight says, I like Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, the second in A flat and the fourth movement in C major. Yes, indeed. Indeed, it's one of my favorite symphonies. And Beethoven, for at least a brief period, we believe, was a student of Mozart. Let's see. John says, wow, amazing. I never understand the pitching of instruments. Yeah, it's very important. Especially if you want to write for something like a horn section, for like a soul, R&B/funk kind of band. Let's say you've got 2 trumpets, alto sax, tenor sax, and trombone, and maybe a baritone sax. Those are all transposing instruments. The trumpets you write up a tone for. The alto sax you write up a sixth. The tenor sax, you write up a tone and an octave, so a ninth, an octave and a tone. The trombone, although it is a brass instrument, in kind of popular music and jazz settings, you don't consider it a transposing instrument. It's only really in classical and brass band music that you consider it a transposing instrument. In all other circumstances, it's not done that way. So trombonists who play brass band music, classical music, and jazz have to have 2 kind of brains, really, because they have to remember that they are reading down a tone on a classical score or on a brass band score, but when they're playing in a horn section or they're playing, Charlie Parker or whatever, then it's at concert pitch. And then your I've said alto sax already, but the baritone sax is in the same key center as the alto sax. They are kind of related to each other. But here's the thing with the baritone sax. It's not just a sixth that you have to write up. You have to write an octave and a sixth. That's a 13th up, because the baritone sax is pitched way down here. Which is where you get... those kind of lines where you have the baritone sax going, or you have to think, okay, I want him to go C sharp to D because I like that. Well, that's fine, but you have to write that a whole octave. There's the octave and a sixth. So you want to write B flat to B natural. That's where you want to write, but the sound that will come out will be, but you'll be writing. So, because you have to compensate for that whole octave plus sixth transposition that you need. Transposing is basically compensating for the way an instrument was designed. And interestingly enough, the guitar is a transposing instrument. You don't write it at concert pitch. You write it an octave above concert pitch. And not a lot of people know that. Mika says, so to be clear, a non-transposing instrument player would have to retranspose a chart written for a transposed instrument. That would be correct. Because if you're playing something that is not a transposing instrument, like flute, for example, which is a concert pitch instrument, but you're having your flute player read a trumpet part for whatever bizarre reason you'd ever have a flute player read a trumpet part, the flute player would have to transpose, hopefully not at sight, because for some people they can't handle that, but they would have to transpose everything down a tone. So if the trumpet part is written in E flat, they would have to be playing in D flat. That's a pain in the butt for flute players. Trust me. You really don't want to do that to a flute player. They will hate you for a very long time if you do that to them. But let's say it's in a nice friendly key, like the key of D for the trumpet. and you give the flute player this trumpet part and say, hey, can you read this trumpet part instead of flute 2 or whatever? And that puts them in, they will have to transpose from the key of D to the key of C. So they take away the 2 sharps. And that would be how that works. But yes, transposing can be complicated, and certainly it can take a while to get your head around it. It's like compression. Compression, understanding how attack and release and those kind of parameters on a compressor work, and what they do and how they do it, can take a while to get your head around. And in the same way, it can take a while for you to get your head around how transposing works. But once you've got it, you've got it. It's like riding a bike. You'll never forget how to write for a French horn part once you've learned it. Even if you don't write for a French horn for 30 years, and then somebody says, hey, can you orchestrate this piece for full orchestra for this particular scenario? And you go, okay, my orchestral writing chops are a little bit meh, but I know how to do it. So there you go. And you start writing. And before you know it, all those things like, French horns in the key of F. Oh yeah, must remember that. Need to write up a fifth. All of those kind of things will come back to you. And you'll remember things like you can have clarinets in B flat and clarinets in A, and sometimes they'll be in the same orchestra. Okay, so clarinets 1 and 2 are in B flat, clarinets 3 and 4 are in A. That can happen. Or let's say you're asked to arrange something that's really quite tricky, but you want flutes to be voiced low, and you go, hang on a minute, flutes will only go so low. Hang on a minute. You can get alto flutes. Of course you can. They're kind of the straight flute that has a bit of a curve in it. And they're in the key of G. That means I write up a fourth. And before you know it, you've got it sorted. And you don't even think about it. It's the same with a compressor. Nowadays, I really don't even think about it. I just know exactly what I'm doing with a compressor. I know I know how to achieve the sounds I want with a compressor, with any compressor pretty much. I know how to achieve the sounds that I want because I know how the parameters by and largely work. I know how attack works. I know how release works. I know how makeup gain and all of those things work, and ratio and threshold. I understand how all those work. Because I learned those on a stock compressor. Once I learned those on a basic compressor with those particular parameters, now it doesn't matter what compressor you throw at me, whether it's a Neve, whether it's an SSL, whether it's an 1176 or an LA28, it doesn't really matter to me, or if it's a Fairchild. I know how broadly to get what I want out of any of those, even if they have like varying, parameters. Like some will have an automatic attack or an automatic threshold or whatever it might have. I know how to work with those things because I understand how compression itself works. It's the same with transposing. Once you understand the principle and how it works, you can apply it to any instrument. So start with something easy, like B-flat instruments. They're easy to write for, particularly trumpet because it's only up a tone. Tenor sax, it's up an octave and a tone. They're still quite easy to write for. Get to know that first, and then, E-flat instruments, like alto sax, which would be up a sixth, or baritone sax, which would be up an octave plus a sixth, which is a 13th. And once you get those under your belt, then you can move on to more kind of sophisticated things like French horns and alto flutes, or bass flutes, or contrabass clarinet, or contrabass bassoon, those kind of instruments, which are weird. But they're entertaining to write for. So, there you go. I've kind of ranted on about transposing, and I didn't really mean to. Sorry about that. Starlight says, trumpet is a step down, so the notation has to be a step up. You got it. You got it. And bass guitar notation is an octave higher. Correct. Again, that's 2 for 2. And let's see if you get the hat trick. Beethoven and Mozart. Yep, Mozart was Beethoven's teacher. Yes, for a very short period. We don't really know. Most music historians, I am a music historian, most music historians aren't really terribly sure how long that particular influence was, in terms of how they, did they actually meet? How much time did they spend together? What was it that Mozart specifically taught Beethoven? Those kind of particularities which we would love to have, we don't, unfortunately. Either documentation is lost or eyewitness accounts are lost. We're not really sure. But maybe those things will be discovered in the future. Who knows? But we do know, one thing we do know just from reading Beethoven's manuscripts is the evidence for Mozart's influence upon Beethoven in terms of style and in terms of harmonic content in particular was pretty strong. Certainly in his early period. By the time, he got into his later years after he lost his hearing, he started innovating in much the same way that Mozart had been the innovator before him. Beethoven started innovating harmonically. He started innovating structurally. He started extending the symphonic form that Mozart had taken from Haydn and some of the later Baroque composers and developed some more. He had simplified the structure and, made things nice and neat and squared off and all of that, which is what the classical period really was. It was taking the Baroque stuff and evening it out and squaring it out and making it nice and neat and symmetrical. And then you get into the late classical, into the Romantic period, which is kind of where Beethoven sits. He kind of sits betwixt the classical period and the Romantic period. And suddenly you start getting extended harmony above the octave. So things like ninths start appearing, major sevenths start appearing, and a few other exotic intervals start appearing. I mean, Mozart had flirted with occasional flatted ninths, and I think maybe in one of his later symphonies you get a C major 7 sharp 11, which scares the crap out of most orchestras, because it's the least thing they're expecting, and then they see the C major 7 sharp 11 and they're like, whoa, that's a jazz chord, what's that doing in Mozart? He must have been experimenting with the idea. But then you get to Beethoven where, those kind of harmonies are, they are definitely still experimental, but they are being explored, and intervals above the octave are being explored quite a lot, and actually deliberately not resolving things is being explored. Like taking a dominant seventh chord. Hey, you don't have to resolve it to the tonic. You can just leave it hanging. Why not? And of course, then that moves into, the what you would call the 20th century period, where you get the Impressionist school, Debussy, Ravel, and people like that who just said, do we really need chords to actually progress? No, we don't. Let's just take this ninth chord and, just kind of move it up and down a bit. Let's write a melody on top of that, or maybe a melody for the bass underneath that. And that's kind of what those kind of people did. Anyway, I'm getting well off topic. But there you go. That's all the stuff that I studied at university, studying musicology. And I loved it. Musicology and pro audio was what I did at university, and it was great fun when I wasn't studying whiskey. What was I going to tell? Oh yes, thank you, Peter. You reminded me. Thank you for that. So for those of you that are still here, and that would be around about 23 of you, I kind of made reference earlier, maybe last week, that we were very likely moving. Well, it is even more likely that we're moving now, because we are buying a house. We're in the throes of that process as we speak. Sorry, I have an itch down in my leg and it's really annoying me. So we are actually in the throes of buying a house. In fact, we are buying a house that hasn't been built yet, is what we're doing. We're crazy. So we're going through that at the moment, and it is looking pretty good so far. And hopefully, all being well, We will be moving into our new home, kind of July, August kind of time. Hopefully, once everything's all firmed up and all sorted out, we'll have some more details about that. But I will no longer be in a temporary house, kind of rented accommodation. That era is coming to an end. Thank you, Lord. I've been renting since I was 18, and I'm coming up on 46, and I have had my fill of renting. It's time to actually have my own house. So that is what we're doing, and it's awesome. We have a house that we like, and it's in an area that we really like. So we're just kind of learning that, there's lots of things when it comes to buying a house that's not been built yet, that there are some things that come as standard, and then there's an awful lot of things that don't, that you have to purchase. So we're kind of finding that out, that you're paying the price for the house, but then there's like quite a lot of stuff that you need to add on to that, which is going to cost, anything over 10, 15, 20,000 pounds. So we're kind of looking at how are we going to be able to afford that right now? But it's going to be cool. And yes, there will be a studio room. It's going to be more or less the same kind of size as this one. It is going to be another bedroom. But do I care? Do I mind? No, I don't. I really don't mind. I'm happy with being in another bedroom, but it does mean it's a permanent bedroom, so I can actually, and it'll be my bedroom. It'll be our house. We won't be renting it. I won't have to ask permission to do things. I can just do it, which is cool. So that means I can actually invest in some better quality acoustic treatment for the studio. I mean, I don't mind these foam panels. They actually do something. A lot of people poo-poo that stuff and say, no, that stuff doesn't do anything. Well, it actually does something. It's absorbing some frequencies. Like in this particular room, it's absorbing some of the upper mids. And being this is drywall. That's mostly what I have going on, but I do have bass build-ups, and I have some decent bass traps, which you can't see, that are kind of taking care of that. And they actually do a pretty good job. Is it perfect? No, but it does enough of a job. And I have been in this room for 3 years now, so I kind of know what this room sounds like. And I know what good music sounds like in this room. That's probably the most important thing, is, learn what good mixes and good quality music production sounds like in your space on the speakers that you use to mix. Once you know that, then, and you're familiar with what that sounds like, then when you mix, it really doesn't matter too terribly much about how well the room is treated. So long as you know what your speakers are giving you, and, being able to, discern the difference between what your room is telling you and what your speakers are telling you, then, you're good to go. So, make sure you keep a slush fund on the side. Yeah, absolutely. We have definitely thought about that, because the difference between renting and buying a house means that now we're entirely responsible for the house. So that means the boiler breaks down or the boiler goes bang, we are responsible for replacing that. We don't have to call the landlord and say, landlord, come and fix this, please. We don't do that anymore. Now it's kind of like, oh, we need to fix this. So it's entirely on us. So there you go. If you have not already liked and subscribed, please do so and hit the notification bell. And when you do, make sure you select all notifications, and that way you'll know when I do my live streams like this one, or when I actually make other videos and other contents such as posts, and occasionally I ask you guys your opinion. So when I do that, you'll get notifications of all of that stuff as well. So with that said, we're at the end of the show. Thank you very much, all of you, for your great questions and for allowing me to just rant on about transposition and all of that stuff. I appreciate it. And the other thing to say is I will see you back here again on Sunday for Sunday Night Live, where we'll be doing this kind of thing all over again, except rather than just keeping the scope narrow to just songwriting, arranging, and musicology and that kind of stuff. Yes, I'll take questions on that kind of thing, but we'll also open it up to kind of more music production. We'll broaden the scope of it, which is what we do on a Sunday. It's much more broad spec. We can talk mixing, mastering. We can talk plugins. We can talk gear. We can talk all of that stuff. And of course, Studio One and Notion and all things Presonus. Because that's what we are all about over here. We're all about Presonus, not just because I work for them, but because I have always been all about Presonus. Anyway, folks, I will wish you a very good evening. Enjoy your evenings, and I will see you on Sunday. Bye for now.
Against me, my back against the wall, holding all the worst cards I feel 2 feet tall. I'll stand and shout, no holding back. Do or die, gonna dig myself a hole. Oh, do or die, gonna dig myself a hole. Now I'm hanging tough and I'm never falling back. When defense fails, I'm going on the attack. I stand and shout, no holding back. Do or die, gonna dig myself